Okay, guys, we're going to finish up talking about the judicial branch and the lower courts. The Supreme Court's the highest court in the country, and they make decisions that affect every state. Supreme Court usually holds sessions in early October until June the following year, so they don't work the entire year round. But all the justices are present when a case is heard. So 9 out of the 9 judges are usually present, unless there's some kind of odd circumstances. Someone is very ill or one of the seats is vacant. Lawyers from both sides are given time to present their case. So it's not like a normal trial where you're going to bring in all the evidence and have witnesses. This is usually just lawyers explaining their perspective on what happened in the lower courts. The justices or the judges will ask questions to the lawyers during this time, and the lawyers will bring in all the evidence to support their cases, but it's not going to be like witness testimonies like you guys are used to seeing in Law & Order and other TV shows like that. They'll usually hear the case for about 2 weeks, and then the justices get a 2-week recess. And they're not outside swinging on the swings, going down the slides. This is their time to consider the case. During this time, they're going to do research. They're going to look at previous cases that are similar and try to figure out what they decided. So when they do that, if they find previous cases that are similar, they have to make a decision. Will they rule in a similar manner and set a precedent, or will they change it and change the precedent going forward? So after the judges have had time to consider all the implications of these court cases, they're going to meet together in a room to vote. At least 6 of the 9 judges must be present for a vote to be taken, and each judge gives their own opinion and view on the case. They try to explain why they are making the decision they're making and maybe sway some of the other judges to join their side. Then, after they argue and debate it, they have a vote. If the case is decided 9-0, it is called a unanimous decision. Any other vote is going to be a split decision, and then it's going to be majority rules, whether that's 6-3 or 5-4. After the vote, 2 summaries have to be written. One of them is called the majority opinion, and the majority opinion is going to be from the side that has more votes. So if it's 6-3, one of the judges who voted on the side of 6 has to write basically like an essay or a report explaining why the court came to that decision and why they feel it's correct. The other side, the losing side of the vote, in 6-3 would be the 3, they write something called a dissenting opinion, and they explain why they think the court has made an incorrect decision and why they voted against it. These opinions are made public, and you can see all of these decisions because they're going to affect every state, because the Supreme Court is the highest court in the country. Supreme Court cases are studied around the country, and if you go to court and there is a Supreme Court case that was similar to yours, it can have big implications because lower courts are likely to rule in the same way the Supreme Court ruled in similar cases. So let's talk about the Supreme Court and how their decisions are the highest decision, but they're not always final and permanent. They are subject to change. So in 1892, a guy named Homer Plessy, he was an African-American man, and he got on a train in New Orleans, Louisiana. In those times, they had separate sections for white and black Americans on the train. Homer Plessy got on a seat that was marked for whites only. He got arrested for breaking the law. And Homer Plessy said, you know what, that law violates the Constitution. So he went to the lower courts, the state courts, and he lost. So he asked for an appeal to the United States Supreme Court, the highest court in the country. The Supreme Court took his case because it brought up an important issue about the Constitution. The Supreme Court does not have to take every case that's brought to them. Like if you were getting charged with petty theft and you sent the Supreme Court a request for your case, they're probably not going to take it. They only take the most important and most influential cases. So they took it because it's involving the Constitution. And the 14th Amendment promised all people have equal protection under state laws. Homer Plessy was saying that wasn't true because he was arrested for just sitting in the section of a train where he wasn't allowed to sit. And that same thing wouldn't happen to a white person. They wouldn't get arrested for sitting in the black section of the train. So the Supreme Court looked at the case and they decided to uphold the lower court's decision. And if you remember when we talked about appeals, uphold means the verdict stays the same. So if Homer Plessy was guilty before and they uphold the decision, he is still guilty. So the court said as long as the train cars for African American citizens, for blacks only, were just as good as the rest of the train, it wasn't illegal. So they basically said it was legal, or it was allowed, to have separate areas for white and black Americans as long as they were equal in quality. And that's going to be a major problem down the road because those facilities are not equal, and anytime you separate people based on race, things can never truly be equal. So, years later, in 1950, there were some parents in Topeka, Kansas, and they put this law to the test again. They believed the schools that their children were going to were not as good as the schools that the white children got to go to. So, they ended up suing the Board of Education, trying to get it so their students or their children could go to the white schools because the white schools had better equipment, they were taken better care of, they just had more resources. So, what happened? They went to court and they ended up losing their first case. And when you lose a case, you can get a second look at it, which is an appeal. So they appealed their case to the Supreme Court. So it's about 4 years later, and the Supreme Court is very different from what it was in the 1800s. So in the court case Brown versus Board of Education, the Supreme Court now unanimously ruled that separate schools based on race were illegal and they violated the Constitution. So these are two very similar cases with very different outcomes. In the more recent case in the 1950s, Brown versus Board of Education, every judge agreed that separating based on race was illegal and was against the Constitution. Okay, so let's go into a couple more details about some of the smaller courts. We've talked about some of the bigger courts, some of the more specific ones. So there's a type of court called the United States Claims Court, and they handle cases where people feel like the United States government owes them money or caused them some kind of loss. If you have a claim against the government because they did something that cost you money. So like let's say that you're a farmer and you have a field full of crops you're going to sell. You're going to pick all of this corn that's ready to grow, or it's ready to go to market. And the federal government is working on building a new dam. And that dam breaks and your whole field gets flooded and all the crops get ruined. Now you have nothing to sell. You could take the federal government to the United States Claims Court and you might get compensated for your loss. There's also territorial courts, and they handle cases involving people who live in American territories like Guam, the Virgin Islands, and the Mariana Islands. There's the Court of Military Appeals, and people in the military do not get the same type of trial for things that happen while they're in the military or crimes related to military affairs. They're usually judged by a group of military officials and not the same typical judges we see in a civilian case. There's the United States Tax Court, and they handle non-criminal cases involving taxes. So like if someone made a mistake on their taxes and find out they owe a bunch of money, they're going to go to the United States Tax Court to figure out how to right that wrong and pay for the back taxes. There's also the Court of International Trade, and they handle cases involving tariffs. And if you guys remember, a tariff is a tax on an imported or exported product. Okay, so the last bit, we're going to talk about some of the amendments and how the court got involved with those. So the First Amendment gives you freedom of speech, which means you can say what you believe, but there are some limits to what freedom of speech protects. During World War I, Congress made it illegal to speak out against the government if it would hurt the country's security. Now, would that same type of law pass today? Probably not. But a guy named Schenck tried to get thousands of people, thousands of men, to resist signing the draft. And the draft was a way that the government would randomly call men to join and serve in the army. And if you were called, you didn't get a choice. So he was going around telling people, don't do it, don't go when they call you. So in court, they arrested him and they said, you know what, you broke the law. You can't tell people not to follow the laws. So he appeals his case all the way to the Supreme Court, and he said that the law violates the Constitution because it's taking away his freedom of speech. It's violating his First Amendment. So in 1919, the Supreme Court heard his case, and they decided that the law did not violate the Constitution. They said the government has the responsibility to protect the country during wartime. And Chief Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the decision. He said that all people have the right to speak freely, but if their speech creates a clear and present danger, it can be outlawed. So what that means is you can say what you believe, but if you are saying something that causes harm to other people, causes imminent danger, those can be limited by the government. So some more easy to understand examples would be like if you were in the military and you're getting ready to go on a raid or on some kind of mission. You can't post pictures about what you're going to do. The government can shut you down. They can stop you from making that Facebook post, because if you post that classified information, it can cause serious harm to the people in the army and the entire country. Okay, guys. So the definition of freedom of speech has changed quite a bit, and it will continue to change as social media and sites like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube change. We'll see where all of this is going to end up eventually. So I know that was a little bit longer of a lesson. I need you guys to open up Chapter 9 and work on the worksheet for Chapter 9, Lesson 2.